Hello, everyone. So this is the fourth meeting, and this time we'll say hello to Jim McKeeth. I've just had him on Skype. He has a few issues getting on Zoom right now, but he will hopefully succeed in a moment. So I will simply start out with presenting some of the stuff I was planning to present, which is SmartBind version 3 that I'm working on right now, and SmartEvents that I've showed a little bit about last time. Now it's a concrete. It's been more concrete. What's the name in English? I don't know. It's been made more concrete. English is difficult sometimes, especially when you have a tongue that is not acting right. Anyway, I will try to show you my screen. And the moment that Jimmy will come online, I will introduce him, and he will start to show whatever he has to present. And I know that's going to be exciting. It's going to be something that has been asked for. There will be some Firemonkey for Linux presentation, and he will also show some RAD Studio, which I know that somebody has been asking for. Okay, let's go on and start to share the screen, and we'll see if that will work this time. Now you should actually be able to, Jim is entering right now, so I will simply let Jim, I'll just stop sharing my screen and I'll let Jim in. Hello, Jim. Just a second. I can hear you very weak.
Uh-oh.
Now it's better.
Okay, good.
So, well, I've just co-hosted you, Jim, and welcome. And it's cool that you're willing to do a presentation on this little show here. As usual, we'll put the show up afterwards on YouTube, and people can go and watch there afterwards. When you are feeling ready for it, then you can start presenting, or if you want to have a small, just a moment. If you want to have a small pause before that, then just let me know.
I think I'm ready. So I was kind of hoping we'd have like a conversation type interaction part here, but we can, however you want to do this is fine.
Well, I hope that people that are participating, they will just join in and say something if they have something to say. And I can ping pong with you too, and everybody's free to say what they want. And there's a chat also in the somewhere on your screen, so you can actually. Yeah, somebody's saying his audio is extremely low. It's not that high. I agree.
Oh, is it? Okay, I can turn up my audio here. Thank you for letting me know. There's audio control someplace here. I'm assuming audio settings. Oh, wow. No, it says it's up all the way. Let me turn it up over here then. Is that better?
Yeah, now it's a lot better.
Okay, great.
So somewhere down the bottom of the screen, people should have a place where they can click on chat, and they will in the chat mode, and I can, for example, say hi, everyone, and everybody should be able to see that. And if somebody has something to say or have some questions, then simply just chime in and pose your questions.
Okay. Let me microphone. There we go. Where's there it is. Okay.
So take it away, as they're saying in the Eurovision Song Contest.
I put together a couple slides. Not anything specific, but wanted to just talk about some general things, and then we'll go into FMX Linux here. So let me.
So that's quite a cool new thing, this FMX Linux. We made an agreement with Kryakov, or I think his name was, about getting it in. That's cool.
Yes. Well, it was an interesting thing. So you should be able to see my screen now, right?
Yeah, I'll turn myself off, and we can see your screen quite well now. Yeah. So.
So yeah, it was when we announced that we were doing a Linux compiler for Delphi. It said that originally the plan was to not include a GUI framework. And like, you know what? I don't think that's a huge deal because I know that our community is incredibly innovative, and it won't take any time at all before someone makes one. And sure enough, it was in beta, and oh look, someone made a GUI framework, and as soon as we released, sure enough, there was the GUI framework. So yeah,
That's quite
so
cool.
I thought a little bit about me in case someone doesn't know who I am. I'm the developer advocate and engineer here at Embarcadero. Um, I do add occasionally bits of code to the product that ships, so that's exciting. But for the most part, I focus on community and MVPs and Get It and things along those lines, tech partners. Longtime software developer on a number of different tools and platforms and languages. So, and it's interesting. I started out with doing Delphi, or I started out in basic, no, batch language programming, MS-DOS, and then did the basic, and then I discovered Pascal, and then later Delphi, and fell in love with Delphi and thought it was amazing. I would always tell people how Delphi was the best. And then later on, I ended up going on to work on a number of other languages, and I've learned to appreciate all of them for their own things. But Delphi has always been my favorite, and so
That's what I'm
whenever I
coming
had
back to too.
side projects, something like that, I would frequently do them in Delphi. Anyway, so
It's actually funny that you invented and patented the patent swipe to unlock, thinking about that the guy behind the camera phone, well, putting a camera inside a mobile phone was the same one that was kind of getting Delphi off the ground together with
it
Arnold Schwarzenberg.
Was it? I thought it was.
Philip Kahn.
Philippe Kahn. Yes, Philippe
Yeah.
Kahn. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met him at a conference. It was kind of interesting to talk to him. But yeah, so yeah, I have a little slide actually about that. I was working at Micron Computers, and they had a system where they encouraged their engineers to submit patents, and I came up with a system for drawing geometric shapes to authenticate yourself to your computer.
Cool.
And sure enough, a line, and then there's actually the screenshot from the patent application. A single line is a geometric shape. So it was kind of interesting because I saw a headline one day. Apple did an event slide and unlock. Jim McKeeth did. I'm like, wait a second, that's my name. And sure enough, I went and looked at my patents, and there it was.
Nice.
So that's kind of cool. I don't get any money because the company I work for, Micron, they own the patent. But yeah,
that's pretty cool.
So for fun, I'm part of this improv comedy group. We do shows every Friday and Saturday night, comedy sports. That's worldwide. There is one in UK, otherwise mostly in the United States and Canada, I believe. So if you're on the US and Canada, you might find a comedy sports locally. If not, come by Boise and visit us, and we'll make you laugh. It's lots of fun.
Sounds cool.
And recently, I was contributed to the book Internet of Things and Data Analytics Handbook, which ended up being like $100 and something book. It's one of those in-depth compendiums of things, and I wrote a chapter on brain-computer interface and how you can interface your brain directly to the Internet of Things, which is kind of a fun topic.
Sounds
I built
scary.
a drone built a thought-controlled drone with Delphi that you could use your thoughts an EEG interface that would read your thoughts directly from your brain and send them to a drone, and you can fly the drone with it.
That's quite scary. Think about it, you started sending something back to your brain.
Yeah. Well, Elon Musk's working on the Neuralink, right? Which is actually bidirectional, because the system I was using was just an EEG, which is completely passive. But he's working on the Neuralink actually is going to go both directions, so you could read things from your brain and then send things back to your brain, both.
Yeah. And the funny part is that he's quite worried about AI and how it's going to evolve over the time, the evolution of it.
Yeah, and that's why he came up with Neuralink, right? Is the idea that if we don't evolve our brains and our capacity, that the AI is just going to shoot past us. And so the idea is, it's kind of interesting because the way our brain works is actually in layers, if you will. We have the reptilian brain, as they call it, the smallest part of their brain, the brain stem, controls like our vital functions. And then we have different layers on top of that. The top layer is the cerebral cortex, and that's where we have more of the abstract thinking, the stuff that we think of that makes us human. And so the idea is Neuralink is going to be this new layer on top of the brain that will expand, give you a brain computer interface and give you access to a lot more functions and knowledge and stuff that we would normally have as a human. So think about if you could just think of something and have the entire Wikipedia article downloaded into your brain, right? Or you know, in Matrix, you know, Kung Fu like that, or yeah, you know, how do I use this new library in Delphi? Oh, there it is. But the other thing is that we could actually have a brain-to-brain interface, right? So we could be have telepathy, if you will, and be able to communicate with the entire human collective, and we'd be the Borg, you know. So
I hope we'll be more like the, what do you call the blue guys, the tall blue guys.
Blue Man Group.
No, what they call those. There was a film some years ago with some very tall guys on a planet where they were connected to a tree, and they were quite calm and collected. All of those working in nice unison with each other without any problems. While the Borgs, they are quite, you know, they're quite the opposite part, I would say. So I hope we'll be more like those blue guys than the Borgs.
Yeah, actually, agreed. I'm not familiar with that movie. I'll have to check it out. So a few things here about why I love Delphi. Just thought, since I'm got a chance to be on your webinar, I would talk about this.
Sure.
This is something I think is huge. And when I worked at Micron Computer, I had a coworker there that was big in Delphi. I think that's when I started using Delphi. And I had a coworker there. I was using Turbo Pascal, and a coworker there was using Delphi. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing, because it was, you know, the language I already knew and loved, but now with this incredible IDE and framework and stuff behind it. But one of my coworkers, there were a couple coworkers I had that used Delphi, and one of them was like, look at this code, you know, compared to C++ code, Visual C++, and you can read this and you know what's going on. Even if you don't know Pascal, you read this and you know what's going on. And that is so important because we spend way more time maintaining our code than we do writing our code. So Delphi it's super productive, but then it's super easy to maintain because you can read it and know what's going on.
That's true. But I was having a similar experience at that time. I was coding in Turbo C 1.5, I think it was the version, and then somebody got pilfered one of those alpha releases of Delphi at the time where it was called App Builder. One of my co-workers, I got it and I watched it, and then I said, that's really cool. You know, that's really cool how you can design a web, not a web of course, but a screen and attach things to events and stuff like that. But then I figured out Pascal. Why the heck is Pascal? Why is not C? This is stupid. Why did it do it like that? And since then I have learned to love Pascal, and well, I'm always coming back to Pascal. You know, even after being wandering off to Java and C# and regular C++ and everything else.
Yeah, and that's the same thing that happened with me. Is I learned all the other languages and taught classes and did lots of work in them, but Delphi is just still my favorite. It's still so amazingly powerful and flexible and such. So yeah, yep, absolutely. So I love the native performance and all the platforms Delphi supports, the runtime library for cross-platform functionality. This is one of the things I love, and actually I have a whole slide about this, is that not only is trying to think how to say this. There's lots of tools out there that give you a lot of productivity, but they usually at the cost of having this incredible abstraction layer, and you can never reach down to the APIs or the memory yourself, right? So C# and Java in recent years, right, have come on the scenes, but you're working at a much higher abstraction layer because you have this whole virtual machine, and so it has like the productivity Delphi had, but now you've lost that ability to reach down and touch the metal, as it were.
Yeah, I agree.
Third-party ecosystem, like components for developers, obviously. So there's tools and libraries for anything and everything out there. Backwards compatibility, this is a big deal. I go to software developer groups and I'll talk to people and they're like, oh, well, Swift 3.0 just came out, so now I have to rewrite everything because it's not compatible, or the new version of Java's out, you have to rewrite everything because it's not compatible. That's like the norm for everybody else, and sometimes like, oh, we have Unicode now, or we have 64-bit or something like that. We have to make a few changes, but it's so much better than than the alternatives out there.
Absolutely. That's the reason why we have made some noise sometimes, us from the third-party developers. And sometimes you're wandering off, or Embarcadero, or who was before that, wandered off in some direction, which were not always very smart. And then we had to change our code. And yeah, we like backwards compatibility.
It's a big deal, I think, because I've talked to a lot of like language developers and stuff like that. Like, oh, we have to move the language forward and innovate. But I think it's a lack of respect of the users and the code base they have out there. And you have to balance that, obviously, because you do need to move things forward and you do need to evolve the tools and the platform. But I really think that Delphi's commitment to backwards compatibility is a sign of respect of the investment, us as developers, you as developers have in what you've made, right? And realize that there's value in that and it needs to be maintained. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I was at a conference and this guy was there that had wrote a program in Delphi 1, and it just kind of, occasionally would upgrade Delphi and, add some new features or some new platforms. And he'd basically been retired since Delphi 1 off the income from this one program. I mean, he worked occasionally, but he said it was just kind of been paying for everything since then. And I was just like, amazing that, you could do that. And I looked at the program, it looked like it was written in Delphi 1, it was a Windows 3.1 look and feel. And he was wanting to move it to the iPad with iOS support. Like, well, you can do that, but you're going to have to kind of address your UI here because you're using all these old Windows 3.1 controls and stuff, and pointing to like MITA converter and stuff like that. But sports latest platforms and technologies: iOS, Android, Linux. Manual memory management, although I guess automatic reference counting is going away in 10.4, 10.4, which some people are excited about. Some people are a little, but we'll see.
Yes. Well, if it would have happened like 4 years ago, it was going away, then it would have been great. Right now, it's you have code that has to be changed to handle somewhere, some places.
Yeah, so I was actually just talking with someone last night, and I don't know the details on this, but there are plans to make that as painless as possible. So, yeah. And clearly being here today, working with all the best people, community MVPs are fantastic. And there's fantastic community members and MVPs in other organizations, but I am a huge fan of everybody out here in the Delphi community to make it such a great tool to work with.
Yeah, I think there's nice sense between people in this in a way that we are talking, in a good tone to each other. I've seen some shit going on in other communities where they're not behaving very nicely.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's trouble everywhere and there's good people everywhere, but I'm a big fan of our community for sure. So this is something that I always think of when I think about how amazing Delphi is I said there's 3 different levels of development, right? And so we have this visual designer components and stuff on Delphi that, are what make us really productive, right? Where you drop a component on the form, set some properties, event handlers and such. What you could do with FireDAC is just mind blowing. I could talk for hours on end just about how amazing FireDAC is. And then of course the cool thing is because, and this is what should have been on my last slide, is because Delphi 1 came out with the framework for the source code, or the source code for the framework, but then we have a lot of other people building their own database access frameworks, right? And so if you're like, oh, well, I want to use somebody else's data access framework, fantastic. They're all incredibly powerful because they're based on that T data set and the whole model that was built up in Delphi. So anyway, that you have this high productivity layer that you do most of your work in, and then you also have, you can write your code with the common language or the common libraries, RTL, parallel programming library, or omni-thread library, or whatever you want to use there. That all your code, you do a lot of code that's in your form that's really kind of glue code, right, where you're connecting components together and such. But then you have where you're writing the crux of the program, right? And that's kind of this next layer down, where you're using the common libraries. But then when you need to, you can reach down and touch the metal, right, and grab those platform APIs and grab the pointers and whatever you need to do. So it's just great to know that you have all those levels as you need them, right? So real quick, 10.3.2 is out. Actually, 10.3.3 is in beta. I have a slide about that later. Some of the new things, we have Delphi macOS 64, C++ 17 for Windows 64-bit, the new language service protocol for C++, which has a lot of improvements around code insight and other features around the way code insight works. So performance and features there. It's interesting, actually. David Millington works as the C++ product manager, and we have conversations how sometimes Delphi has a lot of cool new features, and all the C++ developers are like, oh, why can't we get this in C++? And right now with the LSP and stuff like that around C++, a lot of Delphi developers, why can't we have this in Delphi? So, well, okay, it'll get there. Sometimes it goes one way, sometimes it goes the other. RAD Server wizards and development improvements, which I'm hopefully going to try and touch on that. I played with it some last night, unfortunately, and I had some other things going on and didn't get to as much as I wanted to, but we'll figure it out. Android push notification support now works with Firebase. And then Delphi, Linux, Firemonkey, which is what I've been spending a lot of time with recently, is a huge improvement there. So you can have the FMX for Linux. And then quality improvements. It's the number of bug fixes, just general performance improvements, 400 publicly reported quality issues. It's interesting now that we've moved to this update subscription model, and being at Embarcadero right before this happened, and then since then, before this, there are a lot of things they talk about is that they couldn't introduce new features in a point release, right? And so they had to have the bigger releases in order to have new features. But then the bigger release, we had 2 big releases a year, and that's kind of a lot of work to maintain, upgrading. And so now we've gone to this subscription model where we can have the 1 big release per year with point releases that introduce new features, fix lots of bugs and stuff like that, which is really, I think it's a much better system.
How will it actually go with it? Will it be will it still update the 10.4 to 10.5 number on major releases, or how will a major release be seen in this? Because it's a problem, in my opinion, about version numbers when you're starting to use subscription models. And there's not really a reason actually to make a huge major number shift.
I agree, and I would like to see us go to a continual point release system, really, where it's never a major update, it's always just minor updates, and just kind of where you start up the IDE and it's like, oh, hey, there's a new version, and you click a thing and it's like, okay, I've updated, but you're still working, right? That you don't have to go through this whole process of upgrading. We're not there yet. I know they've been working on lots of various pieces around that, and maybe eventually we'll get there. Eventually we will get there. I just don't know when that's going to be, but yeah. So 10 right now we're on 10.3.2. It just came out. 10.3.3 is what's in beta, and then it would be 10.4 would be the next one that's coming out. And so the 10.4, when it's the 10.x, that's the major release, and then 10.x.y, y is the minor release.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would love to see it just go to where it's 10 is the major release, and then .x is minor, and .y is more minor, I guess. I don't know. Because yeah, exactly. Once you're on update subscription, it's just, you're using Delphi, right? And then you're on the latest version, obviously, because you want the latest features and updates and fixes and stuff. So one of the big things in 10, so actually I meant to put a slide in here about this. We have David I just put together a book for us on RAD Server. So if you're interested in RAD Server, you can check that book out. And I'll put up a blog post that has points to that and some other things, but you should be able to find it pretty easily. It's a new RAD Server book, complete. I'll look it up here. But anyway, so David I just put this book out, and then in 10.3.2, we added all these new RAD Server features, and everybody's like, "Oh, when are you gonna update the book?" And so, okay, hold on, we'll get it updated. But I will want complete guide to Embarcadero RAD Server. Copy link address. I'll put that. Is there a chat window here?
Yep, there should be one down the bottom of the screen. When you move your cursor down there, it should pop up.
So I just see a little sidebar right now.
Might be on the side then on yours. Alt-H might bring up the chat.
Alt-H. Okay, group chat. All right, there we go. So there's a direct link to the complete guide to Embarcadero RAD Server.
Cool.
And then we have a number of other videos, and David I is working on a Embarcadero Academy course right now on RAD Server as well, and we'll be updating it to include the new 10.3.2 features around that. But one of the things that was a big improvement is just the deployment process. We have these installers, which I've used when it was early on, but I haven't used since then. So I'm like, I'm a little rusty. So we'll try and see how it goes. But it just makes it a whole lot easier to deploy RAD Server and manage it and stuff like that. Now, if you're not familiar with RAD Server, you probably heard of DataSnap. DataSnap we kind of see as the toolbox that you can use if you want to build your own in-tier solution. But then RAD Server is the turnkey, right? Where you're like, okay, I just want to have something that's already got user management and API analytics and all this other stuff built together, and you just put that in there, and you connect to the data the data you want to expose or the features you want to expose. You create your endpoints, and it does that for you. So it's a more turnkey solution. And originally, RAD Server was an add-on that you could get, but now it's actually included in your enterprise and architect licenses. So if you have a enterprise license, you have a single site multi-tenant license to RAD Server. With architect, you have a multi-site multi-tenant license, and you can also add it on. So if you have enterprise and you're like, oh, I want to add a second site, well, you can buy that separately. So, which I think is a much better system than what it was originally licensed. Because that's one thing we've discovered is that our users have a specific expectation around royalty-free, very generous licenses. So.
Yeah. It's I remember the bad days when Midas came out. Well, it was the good days because it was quite a cool product as such, but it was a bad day because it was costing a fortune. I think it was $3,000 for an installation. And Benno is right. That is also kbmMW. But
yeah, actually, I was going to mention that. And actually, I've used kbmW in bigger projects, and also I've used parts of it in smaller projects. Or I've used it as a whole, and I've also used parts of it as well. But yeah, there's that exactly. And that's one thing. Like I've done webinars on FireDAC, and I'm a huge fan of FireDAC. And someone says, "Oh well, what about AnyDAC or somebody else?" I'm like, "Yeah, those are great too." You know what? I'm not trying to say FireDAC's better than everything else out there, but FireDAC's amazing, and other things are amazing. And so yeah, if you like kbmW, go for it. I'm not gonna talk you out of it.
Well, I think it's cool that that's the people are asking for And that's the reason why I approached you also about the RAD server thing, because I have been getting requests about, can you not share something about RAD server? And I'm not really the one that that is able to talk a lot about RAD server, because I'm not the expert on that one. So that's I think it's cool that, that you're participating and showing it off here.
Yeah, and I'll try to do a little bit of demo with it, and we'll see how it goes. Like I said, but I'm not. I wish I was a bigger RAD server expert, but I just am not. And when I do stuff with it, I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And then it's kind of embarrassing sometimes. I'll be trying to do something and I'm like, oh, I can't figure this out. And I'll go to Google and I'll do a search and I'll find a webinar I did on the topic. And I'm like, wait, I knew how to do this at one point.
Well, that's how it goes with me too.
Yeah. So anyway,
the age, I think.
Yeah, very well could be. Look at the gray in my beard now. It's weird. And I'm sure you can relate to this. I don't feel like I've gotten old, right? I still feel like I'm the, young kid that's learning to program and it's all exciting, but then at the same time, I'm like, can't pull these all-nighters anymore.
No, there was a time where I was the youngest guy in the computer department. Doesn't matter where I was employed, and that's not the case anymore. I'm getting the oldest now.
Yeah, yeah. I had the same realization just not that long ago too. That I was always the youngest guy. Every the new young kid that knew all the cool tech and stuff, and now I'm like, wait, I'm not. That's not me. When did that happen?
We have to make an old man's club now.
Yep. Yep. Well, it's interesting because there's a lot of occasionally I hear people talking about, oh, all the Delphi developers are old people, and I'm like, oh no, some of us are still young, and then I'm like, wait, no, maybe I'm what they're calling old people now. But I do talk to a lot of Delphi developers that are younger, that are new developers coming on. I've actually had some MVPs that were not 18 years old yet that were super enthusiastic and excited about it, and I have other MVPs, in their early 20s and stuff, and they're excited, they're doing cool things and stuff like that. So it is telling that there are so many developers that are still using Delphi after all these years since Delphi 1, like you and I. But then and so you don't see that as a bad thing. Don't see the maturity of the language or the developers as a bad thing. If we'd all jumped ship and moved on to something else, that would be a bad thing.
That's true. That's true.
I
think that Delphi had a rough time until at the point where, I don't know, the realization was that it should be multi-platform. It has to be multi-platform because that's where things were going, and people were shoving off to all the different kinds of strange languages invented for iOS and Android, the Java version of you had to learn for the Android and all the other stuff, and that was giving people problems because suddenly you had to give up all the old code, and the moment that you Embarcadero started to show that you can actually reuse your code, then in Delphi, in my opinion, became that was the second life for Delphi. That was the time that was actually rescuing Delphi, because otherwise Delphi would have had a grim future.
Yeah. I actually talk about this at one point where we can use FireDAC too. Yep, exactly. Yeah. Bruno, you're right. There's lots of great stuff, lots of stuff out there. There's one thing when Delphi 1 came out, and I wasn't there, but they were at the conference when they unveiled it. I've heard other people talking about this, that when Anders is up there demonstrating it and he does a divide by zero exception on purpose, and the program's like, oh, hey, there was an error, but doesn't die and doesn't kill the OS. Because if you were writing in Microsoft's tools at the time, if you had an unwrapped exception, it's blue screen of death.
Yeah, could easily have that.
Yeah, and the Microsoft reps that were there were like falling out of their chairs, like, we are in trouble. This is way beyond anything that we've done, and and famously Microsoft hired Way Anders and a number of other people from the original early days of Borland and made a lot of huge improvements. And so when Delphi first came out, it was 5 years, 10 years ahead of everything that was out there. Microsoft shifted into high gear and caught up in some ways. And so the huge advantage Delphi had got smaller.
Mm.
And so that's kind of, when Delphi first came out, it was hugely popular, but then because that difference got smaller and because Microsoft had the platform behind them that they could use to leverage that to promote their development tools, right? As the platform vendor made a huge difference. Although it's interesting, if you look back at the different Windows releases, frequently Delphi supports Windows features before Microsoft's tools does, which is kind of, I've always thought odd, or before Visual Studio does, right? So they have the Windows SDK will have that feature support, but it won't be fully integrated into Visual Studio until later.
Mm.
Famously, Desktop Bridge, which is what lets you build native apps and deploy them through the Windows Store, which is great because you can sell them through the Windows Store, but also you can do them. You don't have to go through the Windows Store. You can build these AppX bundles, which have this automatic update functionality. So it makes it much easier to install, uninstall, and update applications. But right after Anniversary Edition came out, we had Delphi Anniversary Update, and it had the ability to do that, and we were ahead of Microsoft on that, and they featured it like, hey, look, someone's doing this. The Windows team is excited about it. The Visual Studio is like, we'll get there, don't worry. And I'm not trying to badmouth anybody at Microsoft by any means, but it's great to see that that commitment to supporting the platforms and such.
Yeah.
So Bruno's saying still maintain an app in Delphi 5 and Delphi 7 deployed in governments on Windows 10 Citrix. Minor changes in RTL, but it still runs. Yeah. And I talked to a lot of people that are supporting old versions of Delphi still. It's actually kind of cool that that you can still use old versions of Delphi. Because I remember a couple times when people were a little uncertain about the future of Borland, and I was a Delphi developer. I'm like, well, okay, if it goes away, we can still use Delphi for years. It's going to still work. And clearly, if he's got Delphi 5 applications still running on Windows 10, yep, it apparently still works. Not that there's something, if you can, 10.3.2 is going to give you a lot more new features, but yeah, you can still be using the older versions as well. So yeah, FMX for Linux, as you mentioned, is a joint project where we've licensed it, and it gives everything that you love about Firemonkey on Linux now. It's pretty cool. So we'll do a little demo of that here.
It's going to be cool.
Let's see. Yeah, so Eugene of KSDev created FMX Linux. He was one of the original architects on Firemonkey. When you install it, it actually modifies Firemonkey libraries to work with Linux.
Mm-hmm.
So it still uses your x86 64-bit Linux compiler, which means it doesn't run on ARM or Raspberry Pi. Everybody's like, oh, what about ARM Linux? Well, no, not yet. That's a separate compiler, which is interesting because Android compiler is a Firemonkey ARM compiler, right? But for Linux, really. So you can kind of, there's some things you can kind of do, but it's not perfect yet. So your IDE is going to run on Windows, and you're connected to Linux via PA server. Yeah. So
I think it's huge that we're getting back, getting Kylix back in a new form, basically. I kind of was missing Kylix.
Yeah, for sure. I did a webinar on FMX Linux, and I talked about the differences between Kylix and FMX Linux and Linux, our Linux support today. And when I first came on Embarcadero, I actually asked, because that was when Embarcadero was introducing the multi-platform play, and I'm like, I'm sure some people are like, hey, wait, you did this before, right? With Delphi for .NET and Delphi and Kylix and stuff, and they're like, well, that was really I'm trying to think how that was put. It was a different time. It was a different kind of play. Whereas today, it's really hey, this is important and this needs to be supported. Whereas before, it was more of everybody's excited about this, so let's be part of that excitement. So especially Linux is definitely a much bigger player than it was at the time. But yeah, I agree. It's like bringing Pilex back. So this is updated roadmap just put out. I wanted to put this on here. There's a blog post out from product management that you can get more details on. But I like to make sure I have this in here so I can know exactly what I can talk about. It's weird working at Embarcadero now. Is sometimes I can't remember what did we release, what have we announced, what have we, what's further down the road. So
well, you can come out with you can spill the beans without any problems here. Nobody else will know, almost.
Oh, okay, great. So 10.3.2 just came out, mentioned a little bit about that earlier. 10.3.3 is what's in beta right now. Big thing here is Android 64-bit. If you are on Android, they require 64-bit now, but we work with Google, like a number of other third-party developer tools on the platform did, and got an extension. So you can get an extension for your keep updating your apps with Delphi 32-bit, but 64-bit's in beta right now. And I can't remember. So everybody that's on update subscription can join the beta, and you can. I don't know if it's available yet, but we usually provide a go live license so that you can go live with your 64-bit in the App Store once it reaches certain level of stability. And Bino just pointed out, MS Tools can't do this, no budget for testing. I'm a huge fan of Windows 10, and Microsoft's a great company. I've been out there a couple times to their campus and talked to them and worked with them, and they are very much aware of what we're doing here at Embarcadero and what we're doing, and they're a big fan of what we're doing, at least on the Windows side. So, there are a lot of great people there, but there is certainly have been some issues with quality on Windows 10. And some people have talked about the fact that they've basically eliminated their testing team. They just have automated testing in their R&D team now. They don't have the quality team anymore.
Some people are complaining about certain things at times.
Yeah, but there's still cool stuff in Windows 10. I'm a big fan of it.
But I also felt like they were falling asleep or whatever. They had a brain tumor or something like this during a couple of releases before those, Windows 8. Somebody still remember that one?
Oh yeah, Windows 8 was. It's interesting because Windows 7's end of life in January, I think. So we just got a couple months left. And actually, I realized just the day I have a computer still running Windows 7, so I have to update that. It's one of those ones that just sits over in the corner and you don't use very often. But anyway, if you look at the chart, the usage, right? So Windows 7's, Windows 10's up here, Windows 7's here, and then Windows 8's, actually 8.1 was when Windows 8 became usable. It's just down here. Windows 8's gone, but 8.1, very, very small adoption level.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Yeah.
But it does have a lot of building blocks for Windows 10.
It does. Yeah, exactly. So if you go back to Windows Vista, was when Microsoft was kind of talking about that they were going to go to this whole new WinRT framework, and you had to be WinRT if you want to be on the platform and stuff like that. No, that was Windows. That .NET was Vista. They're saying you have to be on .NET to be on Vista, and then in 7 they're like, okay, it's WinRT, and then 8 was when WinRT became usable. But then the cool thing about 10 is they're like, well, WinRT can be for native apps as well, and so they kind of, since Vista, have been battling, saying no, native apps are not the future. Native apps are not the future. And now Windows 10 is like, okay, yeah, native apps, they're cool, they're the future, just as much as anything else out there. So that's a huge thing about Windows 10 is that native apps, are now first-class citizens again, which is crazy because, Office and all the other, everything you use on Windows for, as a consumer, anything you buy software-wise is a native app. It was just the enterprise that was, where they were really pushing .NET.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a big deal with Windows 10, and Windows 8 certainly set a lot of that up. So here's the 2020 for 10.4. We have Delphi's getting language service protocol, which is the LSP is it's a standard for how you can interact with the language. There's lots of cool things you can do with that, with improving code insight and stuff like that, but then also for third parties. A lot of the things here, Mac OS, iOS, are going to get Metal 2 GPU drivers because Apple said deprecated OpenGL. Unified memory management across all platforms and language enhancements are coming in as well, which is a big deal. There will be something to minimize the impact of the ARC going away, but yeah, I don't know exactly what that is yet. I have some really good theories. And I think if you look back at some of the things that we mentioned were coming in previous versions, especially on language enhancements, you can figure out what it was. There was the, I think I can say this, we had the new record type, the new record modifications that were coming out.
Managed records.
Yep, exactly. And those, because you can override the destructors in them, and they would be on the stack instead of on the heap, you could certainly make a smart pointer type object with that. So that's my expectation, is that we're going to have that feature in 10.4 to make it easy to deal with that. Yeah, anyway, you can check out the blog post on this. And then I was talking about just all the different things we've done. So I made this slide here. In the last 9 years, we've added 9 new compilers, new platform compilers. And this isn't a new compiler, but we have all the hooks for WinRT UWP applications now using Win32 or Win64. So I added that one in here as well. But that's a lot that has happened in the last 9 years. And the cool thing is, as we alluded to before, is it doesn't make sense probably to take your Windows 3.1 application and run it on Android 64-bit, but you could take a lot of that code and reuse it and move it forward. So just to imagine, hey, if you're on an older version of Delphi, you can take that code and move it forward with all these different platforms and stuff. So
that's what's making it really a cool place to be.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, and that's it for my slides. That took actually more time than I expected it to.
I just need to shut up, then I will not disturb you.
No, you're fine. I'm terrible about that, though. I'll be like, oh, I'll just talk about this real quick, and then it's like, oh, an hour later. So I'll keep talking as long as everybody will keep listening. How's that sound?
That's fine.
Okay, all right. I'm going to fire up my Delphi here and do a little FMX Linux, and then see if we can do some a RAD server as well. So FMX Linux is, unfortunately, it's booting up on the screen here, so just a second, I'll move it over. With FMX Linux, some of the times I'm doing stuff with it, and it's like, it's Firemonkey on Linux. I'm not sure what else to say. So if you used Firemonkey before, then, yep, that's what's involved. It's just, Firemonkey on Linux. So I'll go ahead and open up the controls demo here. And I've actually already added the Linux platform here, but I can show you the steps for anybody that's not familiar with how this works. So you take any Firemonkey application and you'll right click on the project itself. And if you haven't done it yet, there'll be an option that says add Firemonkey platform. Actually, let me open up a different project just so I can show you what that looks like. I don't think I've updated this one to Linux yet. So you're going to come in here and right click. Yep, and it says add Linux platform. Now, if you just made a new Firemonkey project and you come here and say add Linux platform, it's going to say, oh, you have to save it first because of the way FMX Linux has to access the file on disk. It doesn't access the file in memory. Now in 10.4, we're doing some more integration things because there's a few places like this process here that are a little extraneous steps you have to go through for FMX Linux support. But right now in 10.3.2, you come here and say add Linux platform, and it's modified it on disk. And so now it's changed my target platform to Linux 64-bit. On Linux itself, so this is something really cool. This was added in anniversary update of Windows. So Windows Anniversary Edition, I guess it was, which was 3 years ago. They added the new, I'll just bring up
the Linux subsystem.
Yeah, exactly, Linux subsystem. So I did a webinar on this last week, and it was interesting because someone asked about it. It's like, oh, can you use FMX Linux and Linux support on FMX subsystem, or Linux subsystem for Windows? Like, I don't know. Let's find out. And oops, Linux. So they have this Linux subsystem for Windows. You have to turn it on as an optional feature, and then my Alexa thinks I'm talking to it. You turn it on as an optional system, and then you install one of these distros here, and then you have Linux subsystem. So interestingly, Linux subsystem was introduced back in Windows NT, way back in Windows early NT, and they had a POSIX subsystem, and then later they replaced the POSIX subsystem with a Unix subsystem. So this isn't completely new. It's a technology that's been around in NT. Then with XP, right, we got the NT technology on the consumer platform. But now it's a Linux subsystem. So technically on NT and XP and everything since then, Win32 is a subsystem on the NT kernel.
Mm-hmm.
So Linux subsystem for Windows is I'm not talking to you. Why is it always thinks I'm talking to it when I'm not talking to it, but then when I am talking to it, it can't hear me. So Linux subsystem, what it is it's a interpreter layer. So if you've used Linux, there's the wine on Linux, which is wine is an acronym for wine is not an emulator. So the Linux subsystem on Windows is not a emulator for Linux. It is a interpretive layer for Linux API calls to the Windows NT kernel. So it's still ultimately running on the Windows NT kernel. They just announced Windows subsystem for Linux 2, which is available in the Insider edition of Windows right now, and it's actually using a full Linux kernel. So that's kind of a big step forward. Although interestingly, if you're running Windows 10 right now with a virtual machine like VMware or VirtualBox, you have to disable Hyper-V, which is Microsoft's virtualization system. Windows subsystem for Linux 2 is going to use Hyper-V or scaled down version of Hyper-V, which gives it a lot more new features, but unfortunately, it makes it incompatible with existing virtual machine technology. So I'm not sure how that's going to take out.
That sounds like something that somebody will complain about.
Yeah.
Some of those big vendors.
Yeah. So and one thing, actually, I was watching a replay when Microsoft announced Windows WSL2. And someone came up and asked it, because I was thinking the same thing. I was like, what does that mean does that mean I have to enable Hyper-V? Because that causes trouble with everything else. And someone said, hey, I'm running VirtualBox and the x86 Atom Android emulator. Those aren't compatible with Hyper-V. What does that mean? They're like, well, yeah, you have to turn Hyper-V on, but we are trying to work with these vendors to let them use our hypervisor technology, which it's one of those things that's like, VirtualBox and VMware, they have this beautiful virtualization stack they're using now, but if they could leverage Microsoft's Hyper-V that actually is built into the OS, that actually could give them possibly better performance. So we'll see what they do. They might not want to throw out their stuff, but maybe they'll add Hyper-V so it's not incompatible at least.
Yeah, it sounds like that's something they need to look at.
Yeah,
they don't have many options, in my opinion, except perhaps run a case.
Yep. So the plan is that you will be able to choose between WSL1 or WSL2. So at least you can keep using WSL1, which, like I said, is a compatibility layer. So the cool thing, though, here, I'm going to show you this. I added tools here into my tool menu, so I can actually start Ubuntu terminal. Oops, it started a long screen. So there we go. Let's see if I can do this again. This will come on the right screen. Tools, Ubuntu terminal. Oh, dang, it's wrong screen. But the point is, it was that quick. This is Ubuntu now, and it is running PA server. So if I want to do a console application now, actually I was talking to Marco, and I was like, we need to just support this right in the IDE. No, let's not say changes to that. So, that when you install, 10.4, if you don't come in and say, so normally you'd come in and say tools, options. Oh, it's trying to talk to one of my virtual machines that doesn't exist probably. And you have to come in here and say connection profile, add a connection here, and then import an SDK for Linux. But since the Windows subsystem for Linux is now part of Windows 10, we could just assume that you're set up, right? And then you hit run. And if you don't have your WSL running, it would just start it. So now I can click on that and say run. Oh, I got to save this. No, I did wrong.
I'll probably run, and you probably have to have a read line too.
Usually it'll just say, or read line. Let me do this. I wonder if I have it running still. I may have started it and then it's stuck in the background someplace. So there's a command line program here, WSL list running. No running. Okay, so that would tell me if there's anything running, but I can come here and say list, and this will show me all the distros I have installed on WSL distros I have installed, Windows Subsystem for Linux. So Ubuntu, probably the most popular one right now. Red Hat's, I'm sure, popular for enterprise, but Ubuntu's very popular for consumers and enterprise as well. Then 1804 is the LTS. So there's two, if you go to the store, there's three Ubuntus you can choose for. There's 1604, 1804, and just Ubuntu. So just Ubuntu is going to be the latest LTS, long-term support version of Linux, Ubuntu. But you can then specifically run either 1804 or 1604. So these are basically just two separate instances of Ubuntu here. OpenSUSE is a very popular one that is based on the RPM, Red Hat Package Manager version of Linux. So in Linux, there's multiple families. So SUSE is in the RPM family, whereas Ubuntu is in the Debian family. Those are the two dominant ones. Then Kali Linux is based on Ubuntu, so it's in the Debian family. It's more security focused. And then WLinux, this is Penguin is what it's called. It's a version of Linux, a distribution of Linux based on Ubuntu that's made specifically around Windows Subsystem for Linux to have the best possible integration. Anyway, so none of those are running, so let's try this again. Tools.
Benno was asking me if you needed to add the target platform Linux for that one.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I do. Add platform Linux. I was like, this should work. I was talking to someone just today about this, and I don't need to put the read line in there. So yeah, it was running on Windows, and we weren't seeing it. So now it's going to run on Linux, and I click over here, and there it says "Hello World." So that's cool for the Linux command line version. Thank you, Benno, for that. I've been spinning my wheels for a while here, probably. I'd have gotten there eventually, I know it. So then the other thing is I can actually launch Ubuntu GUI. And so this, I'm running the X410, which is a terminal or X Windows server on Windows. And then it connects to the Windows subsystem for Linux and gives me a Linux desktop. Now you can do this in two different modes. You can do a floating window mode where each application is its own window, or this is the desktop mode where I get the full desktop. So the cool thing was that came up really quick, right? So let me do this again here. So I can go tools. So if I go look, there's no Linux. Oh, it's still running. Why is it still running? I can kill it. WSL. Oops. I ran it again. Exit. WSL. Terminate. Okay, it's running. Terminate. 8. Okay, it's not running. Normally it'll do that, handles all that in the background. You don't have to think about it, but just because I wanted to show this, because I think it's really cool. I can go Tools, Ubuntu GUI, and there we go. I've got it set up, launched Ubuntu, and launched PA Server for automatically, that quick. And so now I can go into my controls demo and make sure it's set to Linux, because I learned my lesson the hard way, and hit run. And there we go. Let's see, you just quicker than that. So
Great.
now this is FMX for Linux. This is the regular controls demo we've had in Firemonkey for a while now. Just I right-clicked and said add Linux support, and now we've got all our Firemonkey controls available in Linux now. And all the styles work as well. So if you want to use one of the Firemonkey styles, you can use those here too. But like this one here is dragging, right? So I can drag controls, and it all works here. The scaling works. The 3D works. There's a number of samples that come with FMX Linux. I did a webinar, full webinar on FMX for Linux. I called it Intro to FMX for Linux, but it got beyond introduction. It actually talked about Broadway, which is a pretty cool feature. What Broadway does is it lets, so the GUI framework in Linux is called GTK, GNOME Toolkit. And so Broadway lets you run a GTK application through the browser. And so you can, so instead of a GUI window popping up like you see here, instead you would have, you'd point your browser to a port on the server, and the application would pop up in the browser. So that gives you the ability to run your applications through the browser over the web, HTML5, Canvas. So the code is still executing on the server, right? But then the UI is rendered in the browser. And the downside is it only gives you one instance, one user per instance. But so the enterprising MVPs figured out, oh, look, you just do this, and then boom, I can have as many instances as I want. So you just spin up an instance for each new connection that's out there. So, and that doesn't really require any modification to your Firemonkey application besides just running it through Broadway. So anyway, we talked about that in the webinar as well.
Sounds like quite a practical thing to be able to do, because everybody's talking that everything has to run on the web. And
yeah,
and it's really annoying to sit and write JavaScript for stupid browsers to make things look right.
Yeah, and there's TypeScript, which is Anders made to make the type-safe version of Android, or not of Android, of JavaScript. And there's other things out there that you can do that will do transpilers and stuff like that. And those are all great solutions. But yeah, it's nice to just be able to, it's a nice turnkey thing to just be able to say, okay, Firemonkey application, boom, in the browser. So yeah, I can, if you want, I can try and run this real quick in Broadway. Let's see if I can remember how to do this. I gotta look at my notes. Okay. There it is. So you have to, you get some of these errors. They're not errors. It says error, but it's not something failed. It's just a message you'll get in. Oops, I should have left that open. Well, I have to install. Let me see my notes. I don't think I have it installed. So each Linux has its own package manager. So Debian uses apt and lets you install deb packages. So I got to install some packages here. Let's see. Okay, not too bad. And so there we go. Oops. not found. What? Oh, it's updated. Sudo apt update. Interestingly, I've become a big fan of package managers. There's a package manager for Windows called Chocolatey. Highly recommended if you're not using Chocolatey. Check it out. Makes installing and updating stuff so much easier on Windows. I wonder if I have to.
You have a \B in the end. It's complaining about.
Oh,
not a square bracket B.
Yep. See, now if I read the error messages, I would know these things, but. Okay, cool. I think this is working this time. Okay, so let me open a new tab here and start PA server. And then over here, I start Broadway. So I say Broadway E. Okay, so I got a Windows firewall notification. So this is the weird thing. Let me show you actually right here. I would say allow. So actually right here, you can see the path to its C Windows or users Jim application local packages, canonical group unlimited Ubuntu Windows Broadway. So this is where this file exists, excuse me, on Windows. So the Linux subsystem is not a different hardware implementation. So when you're running a virtual machine, you have a different hardware implementation. So that the cool thing about this is when you make a virtual machine, you say, I want to allocate this much memory to the virtual machine and keep this much for Windows. Windows subsystem Linux doesn't have that. It just uses however much memory you're using on either side. You know, virtual memory manager handles all that for you. So there's no, you're not dedicating certain number of CPUs or certain number of amount of RAM to the Windows subsystem for Linux. It's just all one big pool. But that also, and same thing with file system, but that also means ports because it's the same IP address. So check this out. If I go to tools, options, and go into the connections manager, being weird, deployment connections profile manager. See this? It's 127.0.0.1. So it's this Linux is on local machine. It's not a remote machine. It's on the same port or same IP address. So if you have multiple Windows subsystem for Linux instances running, you need to give each one a different port number because you can't bind two listeners to the same port. So you'd have to have 64212 for Red Hat, and you can have both Red Hat I guess it's Fedora Remix and Ubuntu running at the same time on Windows subsystem for Linux and testing them both from Delphi at once. So let's see. So Broadway's running, and then go to another new tab, file, new tab, and I got to start the GTK backend. So let's see, PA server, and let's go into Scratch and go into Jim and controls demo. Controls demo. Okay, so if I could just come in here and say controls demo, and there it is. I just launched launched it. So that is the ELF executable file. But I can instead say GTK GDK type backend equals Broadway. So I have the Broadway instance running here. That's the Broadway daemon. So I said, okay, we're going to point to Broadway, and I'm going to launch controls demo. Okay. And so now on Windows, let me bring up a browser instance here. I can point it to 127.0.0.1, and then make sure the port number right. It's 8080 by default. 8080. And here we go. There's my Firemonkey application running in the browser. And even the 3D works.
That's quite amazing.
You know, right? That's a drag.
And it was easy.
Yeah, it was. And like I said, I'm pretty sure there's a blog post out there somewhere that talks about how to do multiple instances of this. So you have to think about like the file system, right? So you can, right? What file system am I browsing here, right?
Oh yeah, that's simulated also. So that's the server's file system you're browsing right now.
Exactly, that's the server file system. So if I come in here to PA server, I could, I guess, launch controls demo again. So you can't just take your Firemonkey application and say, boom, it's Broadway, I'm on the web now. I mean, you can, but it's probably not the right answer, but you can certainly adapt it and make it work through this. So anyway, that's really cool. Yeah. Oh, that's on here. I want to do that. There's the FMX for Linux. There's a T web browser support. There's the media player actually leverages the VCL or VLC media player. So you have to have VLC media player installed on the Linux platform to use the media player. See, I'm guessing that's Paul saying hopefully Linux will migrate down to professional. I haven't heard any official plans on that. I'm a big fan of technology, and of course, I want everybody to get all the features. I understand that there's business that needs to be maintained for us to be able to make the technology. So, I hope that everybody can get it, but I'm not sure if it'll be in professional or not. It would be nice, but we'll have to wait and see. I can't make any promises. Yeah, so there we go. Broadway, FMX Linux.
That was a cool demo.
Yeah. So I did a webinar, like I said, that talked about, I did 2 webinars. I did one on Intro to FMX for Linux and another one on Windows Subsystem for Linux, which I revisited some of the FMX for Linux basics again. And again, that was one of those I had to go back and look at the other webinar and say, oh, that's how you do that. Okay. But there's replays are up on their blog posts and stuff like that as well. So you can find more information on that. Pretty cool stuff. And then, like I said, if I were to connect another instance to this, so I'll open another tab here, it will, this one's now disconnected, right? So I go back to this one's disconnected. But the interesting thing is this one is the same state, right? So if I come back here to this tab and I move this guy down to the minimum, and then I come back here and refresh, see I've taken over right where I was on the previous one. So what you end up doing is you create if you want to have multiple instances, you create like a broker that manages that, right? And so each new connection that comes in, you spin up a new instance of Broadway and you connect the 2 together, and then and you can hide the fact they're on different ports so that it just comes across and then everything comes in through this, from this client, goes to this one. And with Broadway, you see a lot more of these, but oh yeah, the screen. So there's no screen, there's no window. Yep, that's right. So yeah, close window. All right, so all right, let's see if I can do this RAD server stuff. So we do have, I think there's a webinars coming up on RAD server. So if I don't get this working today, we have certainly have other webinars coming on this as well. Okay, RAD server. So we have this documented. Like I said, there's the book by David Ide. I put the link in the chat there, and then also we have always improving documentation in the doc wiki, which is what I'm looking at right now. So I've recently reinstalled Windows, so that means I don't have RAD server running right now on here. So let's see if I can make this happen. So I go to users, public. Oh. What am I missing here? Oops. Done this, and I may have done a webinar on it, but this is just okay. I'm not seeing the page I want here. Actually, I could probably bring this over here so you can see what I'm looking at. And someone else can say, it's right there, Jim, you're missing it. Okay. Installing RAD server for testing, but I have to do the did I just run it the first time? I can't remember. All right, let's try
There was an EMS server directory somewhere, right there where we were before. On the Explorer. If you go a bit, there's something called EMS server there.
EMS server install. Oh, that's the
it's
Linux one.
Oh, okay.
I think, do I just go EMS server? Oh, yes, I want to run the configuration wizard. See, I was making it too complicated. I probably, if I would have gone to the IDE and just said, launch this, it would just say, okay. Sample user, sample groups, yep. Console user, console pass, sure. Yep, let's do that. Oh, I have to turn on Interbase. So it does use, is this something we get a question about a lot? It does use Interbase. Want to have Interbase installed. It does use Interbase for the management side of it, and you get a license to use Interbase for your implementation side of it, but you don't have to use Interbase for the data side. So if you could use EMS to build a system that doesn't use any database at all, or use some other database. So you don't have to, I'm trying to say here, is you don't have to only use Interbase, right? So you can say, oh, I want to use some other, there we go. What am I missing here? You could use some other let's let's see. Prop IV console, local. So move to the window so you can see what we're doing here. Come on, there it is. All right. Can I connect to local instance? Master key is the password. Okay, that worked. So, did I get something wrong here? What am I doing wrong here? Oh, I know what it is. I have Interbase 32-bit installed, and I ran the 64-bit version of EMS. So, we'll do this again, EMS server. Yes, let's do that. See, I looked at the error message, and I was like, oh, yeah, it's telling me what's wrong. EMS license on this. Yes. Okay. And then I got a thing popping up over here saying that, all right. So this is the test version of this, of EMS instance. So when you go into production, you're going to install it either into Apache or IIS as a module, and that gives you the I can't remember what it's called. There's a different run layer it runs at when you do that, so that it gets better performance, and then also it takes advantage of Apache and EMS's all the features and management for that, so that you get.
I'll use our completion ports from the HTTP subsystem.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. So I can go here to the console here. Oops. So enter user console user console pass, and I believe I leave. So the tenant is where you have it. You know, like a tenant would be a person that lives in a building owned by somebody else. So multi-tenant allows you to have multiple instances that are completely self-contained, like multiple apartments in an apartment building. So I just leave that blank for the default one. So here's the new console that we have in here as well that lets you come in and you can see the users. So I have a test user created here. You have groups of users you can set up, installations. I'm not running installations yet. Edge modules, these are the modules you create in Delphi that get installed into this. And then resources are what you expose through edge modules. And then I can come here to analytics and I can see how many clients I have, what APIs they're calling, which right now I only have the console one installed, and then endpoints, and then also look at users. You know what users are doing what the users total calls and user endpoint calls. So that's all what's built in. That's what you get for free, if you will, with RAD Server. And then this is the much improved, once you figure out what you're doing, installation process. So let's go ahead and build an edge module here. Remember I was saying earlier about not being as young as I used to be? I keep thinking I can stay up stupidly late at night and then get up early in the morning. So
you can, but you just have to sleep during the day then.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do. Don't tell my employer.
Okay, I have a, okay, so, oops, projects, file, new, other, So I can go over here to Delphi RAD Server package. We'll create one with a resource. We'll use it as the template, and the resource name we'll call it, we'll say C4D. Why not? Right? That's where we're at today. So you can do this either as a data module, which gives you the ability to drop components on it, or just as a unit. And then what endpoints do you want to include? So I'll go ahead and put all of them in here. And I haven't played with the database endpoint one in a while. Connection name. Oh, I don't have a connection set up. Dang it. So the cool thing, and this is something new they added, is that you can, gosh, can I do that? I'm not gonna, I will embarrass myself even more. You could point it to a database instance and actually expose, really easily expose the data endpoints or database through the endpoints without having to write a lot of code. This is one of the things that's tricky with Delphi showing it off, is that oftentimes, especially when I'm doing presentations, I like to show, look, and I didn't have to write any code, but that's cool. But the reality is we end up writing code. In real world, right? You can write code, but that kind of goes back to what I was showing that diagram, right? Is you have these high productivity things, and I can say, look, I can expose the basics of the database just like that, but I can also go in and write code to change that and manipulate it and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and do it without the endpoint, but then I'll point out how that would work if you did have an endpoint. So this is all the code that was generated for me automatically. Let's see, where's the, I don't remember the hotkey. I'm going to change my font size. This, by the way, here, this is the Navigator plugin that comes with 10.3.2 and Get It. If you go in here to Get It Package Manager, which we're also revamping these categories here. So stay tuned for that. There'll be a lot more improvement. One of the things is that trials will only be in trials, so that you can come in and find, it's easier to find what you're looking for. So yeah, bookmarks and Navigator, these were David Millington's Parnassus company. I'm not sure if the term is we bought them or we've licensed them or whatever the deal is, but now they're included with your through Get It for in 10.3 something or other. We were added those. So
nice.
Yeah, these great new things here. There's a lot of we're really trying to leverage Get It to add a lot more cool features in here. We're adding more of these templates. We looked at some analytics on it and found that these free templates were really popular. So I've been adding more of these templates here so you can come in and get some starter mobile applications to just kind of jumpstart your application development in here. So check that out. There's more of those coming as well. Anyway, so this is Navigator. So it just gives you this, thumbnail view. And actually, you can go here and make that really big if you want to. Although you can't ever read the text. Which probably a good thing. I shouldn't try reading that. Okay, so I've created an endpoint called component or C4D, right? So I can do get, and so here I could send back. I could take any object, right, or any data set and serialize it as JSON here. So get, it should be a data set, right, multiple items, and then get item would get a specific item from that, right? So if you had by the primary key, for example. And so you just use the JSON serialization stuff and serialize it out there. Then the put, I should remember this. I can't remember what the difference between post and put. Anyway, the delete would delete an item. Put adds an item, and then post is posting to an item, I think. I can't remember exactly. Anyway, so I can have this running now. So let's go ahead and run this, and it will automatically, if I did this correctly, install into, oh, it's already in use. I gotta close the instance I already had running. Wrong window, select over here. So now I can open browser. Oh. So by default, it just brings up the version, but then I can go in here and say C4D. And that is right here, right? So that was, I did a get. So a get's going to give me, this would be where I return an entire data set. And then if I can say, I want just item number 1, then this is say, give me this one here, where the say, okay, here's the primary key of the item I want, and I would just stream back that single item there. Yeah, I'm not going to do the database thing because I'll probably mess that up even worse. But anyway, the one of the big improvements was that that database option there in the wizard, so that you can just expose an endpoint from a database and just bring out a table or a query or something like that, and just bring the data out just that easily, and it takes care of all the basics for you. Obviously, you're still going to write code, but it gets you a jump start on the way there.
What does it produce? Is it a DLL or BPL or something like that?
So yeah, it produces a.
It's a BPL. Yeah, I saw it up there.
Yeah. Project 14. That's not, I don't see it here. It got deployed to the other folder because it's going through DMS, but yeah, it's a BPL.
Okay, and then it's just simple just to copy that one to the RAD server, and then
yep,
RAD server to re-scan something, or
yeah. So there's
automatically.
When you're deploying it, you there's like a file you configure, and this is in the wrong thing here. In the deployment for Windows, you edit the EMS server INI file, add your BPL equals package description there, and then update it, and it starts running it. So it's really all there is to it. Now, clearly, if you're connecting to a database and you need to have if there's other supporting files you need to do those as well. So if you're wanting to install your database locally on the server, you would need to install that as well. But if your database is on, this machine and EMS servers on this machine, you just put your EMS package here, tell it how to connect to this machine, and you're good to go.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, there's the steps right there. So actually, I should be able to go. This is what I tried to do to begin with, and I went to the wrong folder. Let's see. Yep, there it is. Oh, that's there's the instance that's running for the management stuff side of it, and then here's the INI file that you come in and edit, where you'd add the things in there if you wanted to change the console username, console password, stuff like that. Failover and load balancing. This is where the functionality of IIS and Apache comes in, because you put that at that layer, okay? And so you do the failover and load balancing at the IIS or Apache layer, or you could even use like Nginx, for example, in front of Apache, and that could be your failover and load balancing. And then it just then you have your multiple instances of EMS behind the scenes in multiple instances of Apache or IIS. So it becomes transparent to your implementation in EMS if you are doing what's the thing I'm trying to think of? Stateless, right? That's the advantage of being stateless, is that if the person moves from instance to instance, it's okay because it's stateless. So as long as you have a stateless implementation, which is part of the idea behind REST, then your failover and load balancing handled by Apache RIS takes care of that for you. Okay, awesome. So any other questions or comments or anything like that? Otherwise, I mean, that's kind of what I had planned to talk about.
That kind of also explains that it's not like a live. You cannot have it running live and then update your BPL in it. You'll have to shut it down and then restart it again with the new BPL or whatever. And then you're taking advantage of having the Apache, having a different Apache instance running somewhere, which will then let your users have enough time still. So you use the Apache failover also when updating.
Yeah, exactly.
An instance. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And there are ways of actually doing it without taking it down, because I mean that's kind of a universal thing with IIS or Apache, is that sometimes you want to update these libraries without restarting the server, and so there's these stubs you can get that you can put in there that will let you do that. And I think actually maybe they built those in now. I can't remember for sure. So there are ways of doing it, either like you said, with failover, or with there's some stubs where you can just update it really quickly. And because of the nature of being a stateless web interface too, occasionally, you probably don't even notice this, but occasionally you'll be doing something and a website will take a second longer to respond, right? And that could have been they just updated and restarted the server, right? You
That's
probably
a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, if it's 5 seconds every request, then you're going to notice. But if there's one request that's a second or two longer, that could have been the server restarting. So,
yeah.
Awesome.
Or Microsoft sending you an update.
Yeah, or Microsoft sending you an update. Yep.
Takes a little bit more than a second.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I have a pet peeve about software that when you launch it, it's like, hey, there's a new version out. Can I update now? And you're like, no, I want to use this now. And that's the thing I like about Chrome and Firefox, is they do it right? So in what is this? Is Chrome. So the this little icon here in the corner will get a little dot on it when there's an update, a green dot, right? And that, if you haven't restarted Chrome in a couple of days, it'll turn orange and then red, saying, whoa, hey, your Chrome's like 3 days old. And you just click that and click restart. And so it's downloaded the update in the background. And when you close, it swaps it out to the new version. And then when you launch it again, it's the new version. So that's the way you should do updates, is, download the update in the background. And then when the user closes it and relaunches it, then you swap it in there. Now, I don't know if I want my Delphi to do that, but
but it's nice not to wait.
Yeah, it's nice not to wait. So it should download everything first and say, okay, I'm ready to update. I have all these conversations with product management. I'm like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we do this? And they're like, yeah, we have other things we're trying to get done, Jim. I'm like, I know, but this is exciting. So, yeah, I've got a better understanding of why every great feature can't be implemented right away in Delphi, working here, but it can be frustrating too, because I'm like, no, I want this feature, it's cool. But and we do the survey, the developer survey, and find out what people are doing, where developers are at and what's important to them and stuff like that. And that's a lot of what they use. And quality portal, so go to quality portal and submit feature requests, and bug report. And this is something I've made an effort to do. I've gotten really bad about going to product management and like, hey, when are you going to fix this bug? And they'll be like, what's that? And I show it to them, like, oh, I haven't seen that before. What's the bug number? And I'm like, I just assumed everybody knew this was a bug. And like, no, we've never seen that. I'm like, oh, I'll make a bug report. And I've ran into other people that do this too. And we assume, this is one thing about Delphi, and you probably familiar with this with your tools as well, is your users assume that everybody uses it exactly the same way they do. And so if there's a bug they're hitting, they're like, everybody's hitting this bug. You're like, I didn't know you could do that. That's cool. I'm glad it works for you. But now that I know about that bug, I'll fix it, So, submit a bug report, make sure it's got details about how to reproduce it. And I know product management would they love to fix bugs that are put in. When R&D gets a bug that's easily reproduced, they love to get those fixed. So
yeah, that's sometimes some of the problems, because sometimes some of those bugs, they are horrible to find a way to reproduce them, and then it's going to be a problem.
Yep.
And those bugs are not really nice to work with, but they're the worst ones.
Yeah. It's interesting. My experience has been that frequently when I encounter something that I think is a bug, when I go through the steps of making a reproducible test case for it, I discover, wait a second, that bug's not here anymore. And discover, oh, I was causing a side effect with this over here that was making this behave differently. And so sometimes that's a troubleshooting step. Not to say that there, aren't bugs that can be uncovered, but yeah.
They have many phases.
Yes. Yep. So yeah, that's my bit of a, I don't want to say rant, but that's just something I like to talk about. And I when I have meetings internally with like our software consultants and stuff like that, and they're like, there's a bug, and I'm like, have you reported it? They're like, well, it's in there, isn't it? I'm like, what? We gotta make sure you report it, guys. I'm just as bad as you are. I know what it's like. Anyway.
Yeah, but it's good we have a lot of nice users that can test out our software sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this goes back to, we talked about, Windows 10 Microsoft not having testing they need to do, and they do have a testing team, but it's, when you're talking about development tools or operating systems, the surface area, if you will, for use cases is enormous, right?
Yeah.
You can do. So I took a class on function points a while back, which is the idea of measuring complexity of an application, right? And so the idea is that you look at all the inputs, all the edit boxes and drop downs and the buttons and stuff like that, and then you can apply this mathematical formula to determine the complexity and what the development effort is going to be like, and the maintenance effort and bugs and stuff like that. If you were to apply that to development tools or operating systems, the numbers you would get are infinite.
Yeah, but that's true. It is complex, because suddenly you have people that can use it in different ways that you have ever thought about, and combine stuff in different ways.
Yep.
It's a lot easier with just a GUI application of some kind, where there's limited number of options to do.
Yeah, and this goes to the difference between Apple, Linux, and Windows as well. Mac OS, Linux, and Windows is because Apple, there's very limited hardware. It's either Apple hardware or there's like a few other possibilities that are on that system, right? But it's, except for USB, maybe, USB devices or printers. But as far as what's installed in that computer, it's all Apple. And so the complexity, the variability in the Apple ecosystem is much slimmer. Plus, Apple is, frequently will say, hey, we're abandoning PowerPC and now we're moving to x86, right? So all your PowerPC applications, we'll use Rosetta so that they'll emulate them for a while, but everybody's got to update, right? And so now they're like, okay, you can't have 32-bit applications anymore. They have to be 64-bit. And or you can't do old versions of the API have to go away. And they're doing that now on Android as well, because that keeps things moving forward. But the advantage of that, right, is that you can then strip off these compatibility layers. And like I said, the Win32 is a subsystem of Windows NT, which is in there for Windows 10, right? So Win32 is a subsystem on Windows 10. So I'm sure Microsoft would love to take off support for the Win32, right? Because that would simplify their stack, but Microsoft is much better about maintaining this compatibility, and having that open ecosystem, which Android versus iOS, right? Android, you have multiple hardware vendors. iOS, you have one hardware vendor. So, that there's a trade-off to that. Personally, I like the flexibility that comes with the more open ecosystem, but the reality is it makes it more complicated and more I don't want to say unstable, but it does introduce greater potential for instability.
Yeah, and looking at those things, then it's actually quite incredible that Windows are running that as well as it does.
Yep. Yeah.
Because it's actually rare that we are seeing. It's a few scenarios where a lot of people have been hurt, and I remember last time was something to do with an Intel network card that was having issues booting up of some strange reason. But that was the only thing, and everybody else was, I was starting my Windows without any problems, and I think most people I know, they were starting up there. So in general, it works anyway. So the automatic testing must be pretty good anyway.
Yeah. And they do. Microsoft has their Windows Insider program where they get a lot of beta testing done. So in Embarcadero, we have internal testing. We have our beta program we run through, which we have our some core beta testers, MVPs, tech partners that do some real serious beta testing. And then of course we have an open beta that anybody that's on a paid subscription can join. And so there's lots of things to go through, but of course when you're looking at the amount of complexity, there's always going to be something that behaves differently in the real world than it expected it to.
Yeah, but it's nice to see that Embarcadero is kind of crossing out quite a lot of those bugs that has been reported over time. There was a time where the list was just growing and really not much was looking to happen behind the scene unless, well, it was a very specific, very high-profile bug. Otherwise, it wasn't really looked at. But it seems that there's a lot of more attention on that right now, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, is it? Honestly, so there's the IDERA model of how, once IDERA acquired Embarcadero, they have a different model for how they do development. And it was a little painful. I don't know how I guess I can say that. Don't tell anybody I said that. But the transition can be a little painful, right? It can be hard to make that transition over to a new model. But I think we're really starting to see some of the benefits now of that, in that the ability to have this greater bandwidth for tackling quality issues and bugs and stuff like that. So we have a core group of architects that review the code and set the direction of things under product management. But then we have this wider group of developers now that can tackle bugs and stuff. So I think part of this is the benefits of the new IDERA developer model. But I think we're really starting to see the benefits of that now.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. It was really nice to see the Firemonkey stuff, and it was also good to see the RAD server in real life. I'm not spending that much time looking at it, of good reasons, I suppose. Yeah, so it's nice to have it presented.
Yeah, you have you have your own tool, which is, like I said, great tool. I've used it before, and honestly, I'm not here to sell anybody over one or the other, but I'm a big fan of, here's a tool, stick it in your tool belt, right? And if some point in the future you're like, hey, I need this, that's right, I can use this tool over here.
Yeah, that's the whole point of it. Use the tool for the job.
Exactly.
So
I actually have a slide somewhere that I found this graphic that has a bolt, a hex nut bolt, and a nail, and then it has the hammer over the bolt and the wrench by the nail. And we get really bad about this, is that oftentimes we're like, I have this tool I love, I will use it for everything, and it's not the best solution, right? Find the best tool for the job. I'm not a huge fan of. I like to bash JavaScript occasionally, but I use it sometimes. Sometimes it's the right tool for the right solution for the job. Usually Delphi is the right solution for the job. So be open to using tools that we're not used to, I guess is the point, and figure out how to make things work together, be productive.
Yeah, well, the good thing also about using other tools is that you actually sometimes learn something. You know, I've been evolving the middleware quite a long ways with version 5 in ways that I wasn't thinking about before, and that evolvement came actually from when I was looking at, actually not looking, I was working quite heavily in Java and Spring Boot and all that kind of stuff. And there were some things in there I definitely disliked, and then there were some things in there that I really liked about how to build stuff and how to, you know, augment your code with the information, with attributes, using those they're using attributes for many more things than we are doing in generally in Delphi. And I learned quite a lot from doing that, and I saw kind of light of how should one do that in Delphi, and that's the reason why the middleware has evolved quite a long way the last 1.5 2 years. Because I've been out, you know, in the real world in some other areas where I was forced to go, and sometimes you actually learn something from that. So it's a good thing to use other things. It also, if not anything else, then it makes you more appreciative to come back to what you have.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard a lot of people say that when they learned Ruby, it really transformed the way they programmed other languages, because Ruby was different and made them think in different ways. It's I think that you do need to find things that challenge your perceptions and your worldviews, whether it be global or just in the software development situation, right? Do something differently, break your perceptions, and then either you're going to appreciate where you came from or come back and say, oh, I can apply what I learned here and do something different. So
yeah, that's always nice.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Do you have so who's next week? Do you have that?
Well, in 2 weeks time we don't have really any signed up for now. So it might be a single show that I'm going to do. I'll figure that out, what will happen. I'm not exactly sure yet.
So I'll plug this other podcast I just got involved with here, Delphi Mystics.
You're sharing something. I will just let you share again.
Okay. Yeah.
Are you still there? Okay. Yeah.
Yep. So Delphi Mystics is a new podcast that I launched. I think I'm not on my bio page, is still blank, but Zach Briggs, I'm doing it with him. He and Dave. He does a lot of. He's a software developer. Been doing software development for a while. Big fan of Delphi, and runs a software consulting company. I think I'm not sure exactly what it is. I'm probably telling it incredibly wrong. Anyway, so he and Dave Nottage are doing this podcast, and I'm involved with them. And they're like, "Oh, it's all of our podcasts." And I'm like, "No, I don't want to take over your podcast." But it's really good. Dave Nottage doesn't have his bio either, so I don't feel so bad. Yeah, so Dave and I are both blank. Anyway, it's interesting. Zach has some put together a list of things we're covering and different things to talk about. Just kind of talking about Delphi development. We're trying to get the episodes down to like 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, so that you can be, something you can grab quickly. And it's on, you can get it everywhere. I don't know if we have the list of full. Yeah, so you can get it on Slack, Skype, RSS podcasts, Spotify, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, WordPress, and Blue's not ready yet for being worked on. Gray planned, but not set up yet. So yeah, it's getting easier and easier to find it. So pretty cool. He's actually setting up automation to automate all this. So wherever you're getting your podcast at, you probably can find it. I told him once he gets this all figured out, I'm gonna have to borrow it from him, because this would be a useful way to syndicate other podcasts too. So
absolutely.
So I think so. It's available in video and audio form too. Oh, here has some. Okay, this is the other blog posts and stuff too in here. So here, getting to know the IDE, monolithic development, Spotlight. So he has future episodes on here. see more details. So I think we can go here. And, oh, that's a Google Calendar view. Where do I, shows, okay. Delphi discussions. There we go. So here's why we choose Delphi. I think it's going to be a YouTube link. So this one,
language server something.
we each go through and talk about the reasons. Provider. This is some of the things we like about Delphi and why we use Delphi and stuff like that. So anyway, pretty cool, lots of fun. It's great working with, great people in the community and stuff. So Dave and Zach are great guys and bring a lot to the table. So recommend that as well.
That's cool. Nice, nice site. I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, it's great that there's a lot of stuff going on in the Delphi community, which that's one of the things I look at to see the health of the community, is that we see, you've got yours going here, Delphi Mystics is going on. People are asking me about my Delphi podcast as well. There's a lot of other community sites going on, whether it be Praxis or the Facebook group or whatever. Yeah, social media is bringing Delphi together more than ever. Yeah, absolutely. It used to be there was just, the one news groups, right? Everybody's in the news groups, and that's where we found each other. But now we have lots of social media platforms, lots of platforms out there. And so depending on which platform you're on, you're part of a different group. But there's lots of groups out there.
But we still miss those news groups.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great source of information. Have you ever been able to pick out some of the stuff from there? Was it able to salvage some of the old discussions from the news groups, by the way?
Forums, FOR. Oh, come on, this was working. So I talked to IT and I was going to show off. Failover, yeah. This was working, but I did not check it up again, apparently. So I need to set up some monitoring for it. Basically, I said, hey, I will make sure this works. And apparently I did not do a very good job. I cleaned up some things and made some fixes. Oh, wait. Yes. So these are back online now. They're just apparently really slow. It may have been that the server went to sleep. Let's see if I go to, yeah, so see, it's much faster now.
Yeah, that's cool.
The thing was, so we go to non-technical.
There's a huge amount of nice, cool information in there. That's good to see them back.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm not sure I'm not sure the future of this for sure. It might be, right now it's currently read-only. So, but means you can go and grab information. I'm not sure if we're going to go to some sort of archive mode or what will be happening here, but I definitely want to make sure that we don't lose this. I'm a big fan of keeping things, the information still available, because yeah, it can be troublesome if you lose that. So yeah, I want to keep the resources around for sure.
That's great to see.
Yeah, maybe I don't know if the NMTP is on read-only now or not. I should check, but I think the NMTP might be available read-only now, which means you could download it and have your own copy. It's huge, but all right, yeah, cool. So anything else? So next week you said maybe one of your episodes.
Yeah, in 2 weeks' time, when the next episode will come, I will probably spend most of the time speaking about kbmW internals. There's been coming some other requests, and I will see if I can fulfill some of those. Somebody's been asking about integration between kbmW and authorization, external authorization systems, and I'm not sure if I have time actually to do that for next episode. I have some releases to do also. And that's not kbmW release. Well, I also have those to release, but I have some other releases also. So it's a problematic time about the time. So, but that's how it goes.
Oh, that's
Okay.
cool. I got the spelled wrong, but yeah. So yeah, cool. So they can just components for developers.blog, and that was cool. You got that .blog domain name.
Yeah, that was got a shot at getting it. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, thank you for having me on here, and
thank you for being here. I'm very happy to be able to present you here. So I hope that will be possible another time also.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd love to come back. Actually, well, in front of the camera. This is one of the things I've been playing with recently here. I love pieces of hardware. This is
well, it just make you stop sharing. Then we can see that in full screen. Let's see, you can do that, and you'll be able to. If I'm stopping sharing, then you should be able to go in full screen like that. Yeah.
Okay, so my full. Let's see.
Yeah, now you're in full screen mode.
Full screen. So this is the.
And your thing is disappearing because of the. I have to keep it in front of you, otherwise it's disappearing from the green screening stuff.
The video settings, virtual background. Okay. It's still not working right. Why is this being weird? Oh, wait. Let's turn that off and then come here. I got this. Oh, there it is. No, I don't see it. Okay. Oh, okay. So this is Atomic Pi, right? Which is it normally doesn't phase in and out of existence like this. It's a x86 powered computer that is the smaller form factor, and the price is like $35, $40, something like that. So it's about the price of a Raspberry Pi, but it's Intel x86 64-bit, and it comes pre-built running Windows or running Linux. Sorry, and you could install Windows on it as well. Yeah, Schrodinger's SBC. I'm trying to figure out how to turn off that phasing thing that's going on here.
Just in front of your face, then it will be fine.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get the camera, figuring out how to get the access the camera on it. But wanted to show how you can use this for as far as Delphi deployment goes. But the cool thing is it's got I can't see it. There's got GPIO pins on it, which I'm trying to make sure I point to the right ones here. Anyway, there's all right. So there's pins on here that you can use to connect to like LEDs or sensors or whatever case may be. So you can connect to hardware like you would with Arduino. So hopefully we could do something like that one time. And then I've been messing with these lately too. These are I just discovered this company M5 Stack that make these little devices. Actually, they just end of life this one, which is kind of too bad because it was a nice little $15 Arduino compatible device. It's running ESP32, which has got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on it. But the cool thing is they got this little package that comes in, which has got a color screen. I don't know if you can see what's displaying.
Cool.
So, and then it's got an LED light in the corner. Oh, the light's turned. I don't have the light enabled on this one. And then you got two buttons. You got a button on the side and a button on the front that you can do things with. And then it's also got, you probably can't see them, but there's pins here and pins here that you can then connect other things to. So I don't have they have these things you just attach to plug right into it. And so it just gives it that extensibility right out the door. And then because it has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth LE in it, you can, or Bluetooth and Bluetooth LE both, you can just connect to it right from Delphi, or you could run a web server on this or whatever you want to do with it. So kind of cool. They have they have a larger one that I don't have in front of me that's about that big. Excuse me, that has 3 buttons and a larger screen and a little more power behind it that they're still offering. Actually, I think they have a new model that's coming out, but kind of cool. M5 Stack little devices. The cool thing about them, I like the they have a battery in it. They like it has a case with all the buttons, and then it has these nice standard interfaces on it. It's a little more expensive than buying the raw boards, which is what I have been doing. But the fact that when you look at everything that's integrated in here, it's a really good deal. So anyway, yeah, certainly could love to do some more talking about that in the future too.
You'll be welcome.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. And thanks to everybody that's sticking around for listening to me yammer for so long.
So I'll take over.
Okay.
And feel free to be around if you want.
Okay, yeah.
I'll just stop video, but you should still be able to speak, I think.
Okay.
So what I'm going to show now is a blank screen, and you're probably not seeing anything right now, so I have to go in Unity mode, because that's usually what works better.
I can see it now.
Can you see my screen okay? Because last time I remember I had issues if it was not running in Unity mode when I'm using the VMware, which is a bit weird, but and I should be getting it. Come on. Okay, we'll try to run it. Can people see the screen right now? Then it's fine.
I can see it. Yeah.
And still?
Yep.
Okay, that's cool. Well, I've been choosing a bit about and blowing the pipe a few times about my new smart binding stuff, and people have been asking, you know, that's cool, but we need something more. We also need to smart bind to list views. And of course, live binding can bind to list views, and my smart binding, of course, also should be able to bind to list views. And valid list, image list. I don't know what that is right now. Something
off by one error.
Yeah, but that's fortunately none of my doing. But it's probably because I'm not using the right version right now. You can see up here it's 10.2. I should be using 10.3. It is in my different VMware, but it takes time to move, in my opinion, from a good comfortable zone to something that you have to reinstall stuff in. Anyway, people has been seeing the binding stuff in previous presentations. They know that it's just bind something, and then, for example, in this case, bind to a data set, bind to a field, and then which kind of control do you want to bind to, and then what property do you want to bind to. And you can also tell if you should be going one-way or two-way. Default is one-way binding, and if you're saying two-way, then it will be a two-way binding where changing one will change the other. And the same is going on with the list view. You know, we have a binding from a data set. The data set is defined as one of the memtables that have been loaded in with some biolife. And we're binding the field called common name with the caption of the list view. And further, we also have a detailed in the list view we can bind to. And then we have this at, which means that we are binding the dataset's position with the list view's position in this case. And I'll just have to admit somebody welcome to it. And this binding is a two-way binding, so which means that if we are changing something in the list view, then we'll also change. If we're changing position in the list view, then we'll also be changing the position in the dataset. And they have the same on this list sample here. The list sample is just a list of objects which we are binding to a list view which has been set up with a dynamic view. Somewhere dynamic appearance here, and somewhere we have I'm not really good in list views, but they're great. You know, there's been put in a new item that's called text2 over here, and we're binding to that one also. We can see the binding going on here. Bind the lines object list, the name to the caption, and the address to the text1 entry, and the name, again, just for fun of it, to the text2 entry. We can try to run and see what happens. And this is, by the way, a Firemonkey application right now. So we are preparing a list, and we have, you know, binding of edit fields and labels, and we have bound a caption of the button also for the fun of it. We can also show that we can, the button is getting data from two places. Actually, it's getting both data from the dataset and also if I'm typing something in the memo. So.
Does the typing in the memo change the dataset too, or just the button?
Right now it's just it's only changing the button, but
Okay. Cool.
but if I would be binding, for example, from the button to the to this edit box up here or directly to the dataset, then it will be optional two-way binding. But I can type next here. We have our version of a navigator down here, which is just some buttons, and we can see we can navigate through a list view, and if I click in the list view, we're also navigating. So it is as one would expect a list view to operate and a binding to operate. And I'll just run it again, but now with the dataset as a demo. And you can see down here, we have to, clicking on something down here, we will automatically update as we are used to. All these things, they are just regular controls. They're not DB controls or live view bound controls. They're just regular controls. So we can, do the same with a combo box, and we are switching around as usual.
That's really cool.
And I know that right now we have an Embarcadero representative with us, right? And I've been talking about live binding before, and I think live binding, as I told also earlier, is a really great invention because it's something that makes it easy to bind something together, and which should be easy. It should be easy to present data. Basically, that's the whole point of everything. I've just come to the conclusion myself that live binding is a bit complex when you are trying to do stuff behind the scenes, and it's also problematic in the sense that you cannot really refactor your live binding in an easy way. So that's something you miss in live binding. If you have a control, for example, you're moving that control to a different form or something else, then your live binding is getting confused. At least it's disappearing. It's not automatically being moved together with control. In this case, it would be, because it doesn't really matter if as long as this control is known, then it will just bind to it still. Or one could use the version 2 binding, which I've also shown in one of the earlier demos. But I'm showing it now because I have you online also, so you can see how the idea behind that is. We have some simple design time binding, and the binding is actually based on what is written in a string caption. We have it somewhere here. And we're just saying that we want the data from coming to this should be coming from edit3.txt, and it should be two-way. So it means that the moment I'm typing in edit4, then it will automatically update edit3 and vice versa.
So you could point that to a data set and have it two-way.
Yeah, and of course now I have something in here deleting. Because I'm doing something else. I'm fooling around with the code right now.
Of course. I've worked with a few companies where the manager comes by and says, "Hey Jim, I got a customer here. Can you demo this feature?" I'm like, probably not. I'll be lucky if it compiles right now, let alone runs.
Yeah, that's because I'm working with actually I did have probably I did change it here, did I? No, sub item. Because the image. It's because I'm working on extending live binding also to handle images. Unfortunately, I have been checking out the FMX part and not the VCL part for those different parts, but it doesn't matter. We can see here if we are running it, a simple demo. We can type here, and we can type in the other one, and the binding is happening automatically. And we have, for the fun of it, bound also the caption of this button and label.
So how does that work on the grid? I see you have grids up there as well.
Yeah, grid column binding. Then I have actually been putting in a different label, for example, where the binding could be put in.
Okay.
And then we have next. We have a grid here. Actually, that's just a string grid, and we have more items than can be shown in the string grid, so it's possible to scroll by the way also. And we're saying that we are taking data from test2, which is a proxy, and that's the @ sign is showing that this is a proxy, which means that we can switch the data producer, just similar to what the live binding has in the prototype binding. We can switch data on the fly. Actually, I have some place somewhere, I call them binding separation over here, I think. Here, for example, we have some bindings which are running automatically. There's some controls here, and they're bound to a data producer that's producing random data. And redefining test data, then it means now it's getting data from somewhere else. It looks like I've just put in some text here, but actually what's happening behind the scene is that it's switching out the test data proxy and saying that now it should use test data instead, which is this one we have instantiated here, and it should be getting the values that's been put into the constructor here. So it's an easy way to switch out data. And it can be navigatable data, can be any kind of data. Yeah, I think we have something similar over here. This one is redefining with another memory table. It's showing, I think it's showing a list of objects. Yeah, we have a list of objects here, and we can redefine that. And now it will show stuff from a memory table instead.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, we have also grid cell binding. So you can specify a specific cell in a grid to bind something to. And then typing here, then we'll change over there. I think it's probably yeah, two-way defined. Like that. And we have some binding expressions. Don't we have that where somewhere? I don't know if it's that, if it's this demo. I'll try to find out demo. Binding expression. Yeah, we have some binding expressions in here. It's the VCL. This view, navigatable, and I think also with the data set. Yeah. And live move, because we have in VCL, it's reacting immediately here. We can, of course, navigate by using this one. And then we have an expression binding here where I can actually add two fields together, and also as you have these features in live binding too. But it's just, in my opinion, easier to define in this framework. We're binding a edit 11 text with edit 12 text, and it's two-way binding. And then I was saying, okay, on the way to the destination, then we want to run this expression, and we want to put hello in front of the data basically. And on the way back, then we want to remove that hello. So if there's something typed in edit 12, we want it back to edit 11, then we are skipping that or truncating that hello. So it's not written there anymore. And well, it's just an easy way to bind stuff together. We can bind using functions, anonymous functions as sources, and we can bind as using anonymous functions as destinations also. For example, if there's a change to edit 7, it's, I don't know which of them it is of these demos. Function there, probably that one. If we're changing something in this one, then I probably should prepare it like that. And it's locking down here. Got to change.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, I'll just clear it like that, and you can see it again like that. And it will tell that a couple of times because there's that's the way it's working. It's working a different way than live binding, which is event oriented. And this smart binding is not event oriented. It's actually polling. So it's keeping track of old values and new values and positions and everything like that for everything that's bound up, which means that it's not prone to infinite loops, because it's up to the binding framework how many times it actually wants to loop. So you're not ending up in stuff that is bound to something else that is bound back to something first, perhaps via some extra bindings, and then you will have an infinite loop. That can't happen in this framework. Yeah. So the version 3 of smart binding is the major things are, there's been a rewrite in parts of it. So it means it's possible for it to handle list views, and it's also possible for it to, I'll probably show that in here. No. It's also possible for it to show, where is that? That's not the right one. I'm pretty sure I put it in somewhere. Must have been in here somewhere. Yeah, one can specify a window type. In this case, it's not really interesting, I suppose, because the list view is not happy to be windowed. One of the problems about binding, for example, to lists or to grids and stuff like this is that you cannot just show if you have 2 million records, you don't want to show all those records in a list. And default, if you want to have the scroll bars on the list and everything like that, then you have to fill up the list with all the stuff that's supposed to be in it, like those 2 million records. But you'll run out of memory before time. So one can instead run it in windowed mode. And that means that this particular binding will try to operate windowed, which means it will only generate the amount of fields that, or the amount of data that you can actually visibly see in the screen. And then it will update those automatically by itself behind the scene when you are scrolling using the navigator within the smart binding framework. Which means we are bypassing the T dataset navigator. Basically, we're not bypassing it anyway, because it's keeping track. If you're moving a current pointer in dataset, then the system would pick it up and will automatically refresh whatever needs to be refreshed to show the new reality. So you could still use the old navigator from a normal T dataset, but this one also works with the objects and all other kinds of things that can have multiple records.
Oh, excellent.
Okay, so that was smart binding, a little bit about that. Then last time I showed something about a peek about the smart events, because one of the things that smart binding lacks is, what are you doing with buttons when you're clicking on them? And I know action lists have been defined for many years, which was a way to kind of generalize what should happen when something is being clicked on. I have found that I need some more abstraction to that to be able to plug in and plug out. For example, frames. If you have a frame with some buttons on, and you want that button to do something for you that is not on the frame, then you have to write all kinds of callback code or event code or whatever on your frame. Do a lot of boilerplate code, and then your main application will need to know about that boilerplate code to be able to hook into it. And that's not funny, in my opinion. In my opinion, it would be a lot more fun to just say that I'm doing something right now, just act on it. And then if there's something around in your application that is able to act on it, then that will pick it up. Without the frame or the button specifically telling who is the one that is supposed to pick up on it. And in this case, we, for example, have a subscription and we have a notification. That's the way we are defining stuff. We are subscribing on stuff, and then we are notifying about stuff. Notification, in this case, is a simple event.notify. And then we use a syntax here, which is for the people that have been using the wide information bus, which is the messaging framework, is following that syntax. Have different parts which can be separated by dots, and you can also subscribe with using wildcards and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, somebody that's subscribing a form.do something, they will automatically be called, and they will be getting those data here. They will be getting the button 1 that is doing the call in this case, and they will be getting its caption just as a demo thing.
So is the notify? It's always an object. The what you're notifying object, and then
no.
A string or
This is optional. Whatever arguments you put in, you can notify without any arguments, or you can put in any number of arguments like that.
Yep. All right.
So this is just for the demo purpose and nothing else. The only
Sure.
thing that is not optional is the subject.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But since we are sending arguments with it, then whatever is subscribing for this will also be able to receive those arguments.
Mm-hmm.
And we can try to see subscribe by code. Here we are subscribing for any event which are starting with form dot. And the moment we're receiving that, then we will log that. That's the simple thing. And then we are doing also making a subscription for form dots, do something dot, and then anything. And in this case, we are calling a method called button pressed with the first argument as a T button and the second argument as a string. And button pressed will just say that it's been pressed. We can try to run this. We subscribe by code, and then we click this one, and it was pressed.
Mm-hmm.
And we got a log up here also. Global form subscription, do something reacted. So this one was triggered, and this one was triggered. But that's an easy way to subscribe for something by code and then react on it.
Now that's is there one message bus for the whole application?
There's basically a message bus inside this event instance which exists as a singleton. But if you want to have multiple message buses, then you can instantiate more kbmMemTable event, SmartEvent instances. Okay. And then you can operate those separately. It's a very simple kind of a message bus, but what it handles is that it handles the needs of both stuff that can run completely asynchronous and things that needs to be running synchronously. For example, this one down here, button pressed, this code, since we know this code will show something, will show a message in this case, we know that this will have to be run synchronously with the VCL thread, with the main thread. Right.
Oh, wow, that's great.
So we're just saying that it should act like that, and it will happen it by itself.
Mm-hmm.
If it's that's also, by the way, the same with the smart binding I was showing before. It will also automatically figure out whatever is smart bound. Is it a control or is it not a control? If it's something that is not a control, then it doesn't need to be synchronized necessarily, and it will run completely asynchronously to the rest of the system.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of keep two pools of data, two pools of bindings. In this case, event bindings. In the other case, normal bindings, data bindings, we can call it. One of them which are running synchronously, and another one which is the asynchronous stuff that has to be run.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can subscribe form. A subscribe form, well, what is that? We have an event that's just saying subscribe self. Well, we're calling subscribe self. And what does that mean? We can try to look at the form. And we'll see that there are some event attributes down here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which are annotating the button pressed method. And that means that in this case, we are subscribing for, if somebody is notifying about do something, we want synchronously to run button press true. And since we have arguments available on this one, it will receive the arguments from the caller if they are matching. And if we just put the button like this and didn't have this one, then we'll just get the button.
Mm-hmm.
And in another case, we have a function called call with return. That means that we are providing a function that can return some data back to the one that is notifying about something. So it's a way to make a an abstracted call with a response. And we can try to see how that works. Is it sim2? No, it's not. Where do we have it? We're notified. When done, where is it? Yeah, we have done notifying. We have, for example, here, this one with notified. That means we are doing a notification. This is a different way to write a notification. Up here, we just write notified. That means that this will fire immediately. We'll just send it off. In this case down here, we are actually, we want to add something onto our event before it's been fired. So we're using notification syntax, which is the same as the notify, except that it's just not sending it yet. It will only send it the moment we are reaching the send method down here. So we're asking when it's been notified, which means that somebody has been notified about something. Then we want to get information about what has been notified. So we want to get information about the subscriber name in case there's a name on that subscriber, and the subject that is subscribing for. We can name each subscriber, so that's the reason we can get this information back. And we can try to run that. When notified, probably I should subscribe something first. Subscribe form. When notified, then suddenly something happened down here, and we got press 2. And then we have a way to notify all subscribers which are subscribing, and then when all of them has been notified, then we are getting this code run down here when done. And this code also wants to get results back. So we are making a notification with these arguments. We want to results back. We want also a list of subscribers that was receiving the results of the notification. And the moment that everybody has been notified about it, then we can loop through that list, and we can show who has been notified and also show what was the result. And we can see the result is coming back here we're getting a result count, and we're also having, probably have to stop it before I can show what's in here. Like that. We also have a results array thread list we can access. We can try to run that one. And that will call that function, and we'll return the data. Press 2. We got a null result return. Probably we got a number of results down here too. Is in just break it so we can see it. And one of the results down here is a button 1 and a symbol 1, and the second one is a null because one of them is not returning anything to us, and I'm trying to show that. So, but that's a planned part of the demo. But that's basically the new event framework, which are operating on loosely coupled events. And one of the reasons I'm writing this is because I do have made a task of doing some code for a large company who needs to be able to plug in and out, for example, frames and other things, and everything has to be extremely dynamic. It's even dynamic what's been shown inside each frame. It's based on a workflow that's building up everything. And the workflow is, of course, user-definable, but it's been defined by an XML and other stuff. And for that reason, I need every event handling and binding stuff and everything to be completely dynamic. And that could really not be done using live binding, and it could not be done using hard coding. The only way to do that is to have something that is, completely dynamic, where you can just specify strings for whatever you want to bind to. Of course, I have to, in this case, to provide some functionality, like, for example, this button pressed or call with return or whatever, some features that are available inside the framework, inside the application. But how and where and from, in which case the user is actually activating this functionality, that's completely up to what's been written in the workflow, which is a textual kind of description. So that's where it's going to be quite important and for that reason, I'm developing this, and for that reason, I am hoping that somebody else can get something cool out of it also.
Yeah, I would think probably wouldn't you, and you'd want to use, instead of hard coding global.form, you would probably want to use like a or form.do something, probably like constants there, wouldn't you? So you make sure you get them all synchronized up.
Yeah, that would be a nice thing to do to define a constant string instead. So you have the right subjects written somewhere.
Yeah,
Be a good place to have it in a separate unit. Simply define them there.
yeah. This is we're talking earlier about the fact that you use different languages and get different ideas about how to do things, because this is similar to, I guess, Objective-C, and some other languages, how they do this whole messages and subscriptions and stuff like that for button handlers and stuff. So yeah, very cool. I can think of a lot of times I did tried to solve a similar problem previously using a different system, but this is really cool. I get a lot of times I'd want to use something like this.
Well, feel free and you can get a license.
I would, yeah.
Well, you don't have to comment on that.
No, honestly, there's all these projects I want to do, and no, I actually, I was just pulled up your pages looking at it here, because I could think of things I would use this for, but actually getting around to using it is getting things done is always
that's always a problem. That's how it is.
I used your kbmMemTable years ago. I really liked it. It was a great memtable.
It still is.
It still is, yeah. And yeah. Sorry. It's interesting. I was working with a developer. Oh gosh, it was quite a while ago. But he knew Delphi really, really well, but had never done anything with databases. And we were doing some database development, and so I was like trying to teach him how to do database stuff. And as soon as he got the idea of working with sets of data and how you can let me bring up my, you turn my screen back on.
Yeah, just so we can see when we chat. Well, if it will work. I don't know if it will work. There you are.
Yeah. Anyway, as soon as he understood the idea of what you could do with a memory data set, and how you could work on these sets of data and stuff like that, he was just like, oh my goodness, this is great. And so he used it everywhere. Everything he was doing, he had a memory data set going on. It was using it. And it was kind of fun, kind of cool to see, all the things he was thinking about and doing things and stuff like that. But yeah, it's neat. Yeah, very cool.
Actually, it just came about by accident. And because I was cheap. At the point in time, I was working for the Danish. Well, it's not Danish. It was Scandinavian airline company called SAS, Scandinavian Airline System.
Yep, I've flown on them before.
That's cool. Well, they were better than they are now. I would say that. But the meals are pretty horrible. Have been for quite a long time. But at that time, you were getting great meals on board. Anyway, I was responsible for rewriting some Oracle Designer Forms 2000 code that was handling all their, they had a huge data warehouse database where I could get reports about all kind of things, like, how many stolen suitcases there's been, how many incidents of airplanes, and all different kind of things, huge amount of things. And it was running really bad on Oracle Forms 2000 and on Designer 2000. It was too slow. And they also wanted to be a web-based system. So I was looking at it, and I was saying, okay, I can do that. I would like to use Delphi for doing it. And Delphi, well, we do not accept Delphi here. Oh, okay. We have a list of tools here, and one of the tools on that list, that was C++. Ah, cool. Then I'm using C++ Builder. And writing a lot of stuff in Delphi behind the scene, of course. Anyway, but that's, I got accepted, and was through reviews and everything. And it's kind of bureaucratic to get things done that way. And when we're getting through reviews, then you don't want to come to those people and again and say, by the way, I have found a new issue I have to solve, which Delphi, by the way, couldn't solve automatically out of the box by itself. I have to spend $35 US. It was really nothing. But just going to them and asking for that was not an option, because then I had to get something else, third party inside the framework, to be able to do what I was promising I could do from start. And I was a rookie at the time. I was a young person, so I said, okay, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to ask them. They will be giving me problems later on. So I started to write a very, very rudimentary memory table. And the whole point of that it was supposed to do was, I was getting a lot of data back from the Oracle database as stuff that was in rows, a date and then a value. Very simple. But I wanted to have those data shown to turn around for being able to show them nicely in a grid, and to be able to show them nicely in a graph. So there will be a date, and then there will be a lot of values.
Right.
Or I had the similar problem just the reverse way. I got a lot of values back, and I had to turn around to a lot of rows. And I was not the one that could actually tell Oracle how it should present stuff to me, because I was just calling stored procedures, and I was not allowed to touch those stored procedures. So I had to have something in my own application that could do that stuff. And for that reason, I needed a memory table, or something that was similar to a memory table. And well, then version 0.01 started out, and it kind of evolved from there. It was an exciting time. At some point, I think it was at version 0.9, I decided to release it as open source, and there was a huge amount of people that suddenly contacted me. I had hundreds of calls every day, by emails and stuff like this, about this memory table and about how to use it, and couldn't we get this stuff in? And I found a bug like that, and don't you support this feature? And when are we going to get indexes, and all this kind of stuff? And then kind of just evolved from that, and became a bit of a monster today, but it's a gentle-minded monster, fortunately.
Yeah, it's great to see that you took this and made it into product you support. I've had conversations with people before that have done. They'll show me some cool bit of tech they've put together, and I'm like, oh, you should share this with other people, and they're like, oh, yeah, but then I have to support it.
That's a problem usually. It's ending up in a lot of work, and well, you have to like it. It has to be fun to do that. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it.
And it's the open source versus commercial route. I mean, if you go the open source route, you can say, oh, well, add that feature yourself, right? But whereas if you sell it to somebody, you're kind of on the hook to supporting them. But at the same time, sometimes if you give it away, then you're kind of on the hook to support it as well. So it's like, oh, that's too expensive to give it away.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, that was about it. I don't have much more this time. And I hope everybody has been getting something for their money. Well, they didn't pay for it, so they have. And so I'll say bye-bye to people. Well, you say what you want, Jim.
I was going to say, I wish I had more time to use these all these components more, just because I love just the technology, and I love seeing the neat things of how you're doing these smart bindings and stuff. It's all cool stuff. So very cool.
Thanks. That's cool. Awesome. Take care, Jim, and thank you very much for your presentation.
Oh,
I'll see you soon again.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.